You've probably heard about Claude Code before, but if you are like me and most other sellers, you quickly dismissed it because you are not a software developer. But we couldn't be more wrong, because Claude Code is actually one of the most powerful AI tools out there, even if you don't know how to code. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use Claude Code to build AI automations in N8N. But that's just scratching the surface, because more importantly, I'm going to show you how to set it up and use it in your business. Let me show you how it works. For me, the biggest difference between Claude Code and regular Claude or any other LLM like ChatGPT or Gemini is that Claude Code actually feels like an AI agent who wants to go out there and do things rather than just have a conversation. And this is extremely powerful because I feel like this is the first time when I have access to a true universal AI agent. And you will see in just a few minutes what this can do. When it comes to Claude Code, when we want to get access, it's not as simple as actually opening Claude on the website and starting our conversation. When we open it here, we will notice that we have a few options how to make this work. So let's take a look at it. Option number one is a terminal. And this is probably the most intimidating one because it means opening your terminal on your computer and actually interacting with your AI from here. And if you don't know how to code, I understand it's quite intimidating, so we're not going to do that. Another option is to use something like Claude desktop app, where we can switch from chat to Claude here, and it has this nice user interface and we can use Claude Code from here. But then again, it's very important to understand that from here, there are a few limitations, and we will cover that later on in the video. So this one is also not optimal. What we are going to use is what's called IDE. You've probably heard about anti-gravity or cursor. In this case, we are going to use VS Code, which is very similar, and it allows us to unlock all of the abilities of Claude Code, and it is free. What we need is just a paid plan of Claude, and that way we can use VS Code to access our Claude Code right there. You've probably heard the news that Claude also released something called Claude Cowork, right? And this is supposed to be the Claude Code for people who are not developers. But what's important to know is that Cowork is still quite limiting, right? It is oversimplifying things. And if we want to get access to everything we can do with Claude Code, we should really learn how to use something like VS Code, which is what I'm going to show you today, because it's quite intimidating for the first 15-20 minutes, but then you have access to everything you need and you are not going to want to go back to anything else. So what we are going to do is that we want to install VS Code. So this link, I will leave all of the link in the description, and you can download this called the Visual Studio Code. So you will download it and install it. It is free, very straightforward. Now, when we open VS Code for the first time, it looks very intimidating, right? Because this is built for developers, and I'm not a developer, so I was quite intimidated the first time I opened this. But I will show you how to simplify this, how to really make it as straightforward as possible. So the first thing is that we want to have Claude Code right here in the VS Code. So we are going to go right here into extensions, and we are of course going to search for Claude Code, and you will find the extension right here, Claude Code for VS Code. There are many other extensions, we don't care about it for now. We are going to open this and install. Once you install this, a small button in the upper right corner will appear right here called Claude Code Open. Now I can open this, I can close this window. And if you are doing this for the first time, it will ask you to log in into your account, right? So there will be like authenticator account, you will log in into your account. And as I said, you will need at least the plus plan, which is like $20 per month. Trust me, it is well worth it. You should have a subscription for Claude. Now, we have Claude Code right here. And this is already quite familiar, right? Because I can say, hey, how are you? And if you use Claude or ChatGPT, you will feel like at home. The UI is slightly different, maybe a little bit more intimidating, but it works exactly the same. I can talk to the AI right here. I can access past conversations. So as you can see, I already asked him once today how he is. And Here we can interact with it. What I also want to recommend you is to use voice control for your computer so you can actually talk to the AI. This really speeds up the workflow. You know, we all speak faster than we can type. So I can actually use something like Whisperflow. I will leave a link in the description that will give you like a month of the premium so you can try using it, which means that when I'm interacting here and so I can actually talk to it, right? So, hey, you're going to help me build N8N workflows today for a YouTube video. So as you can see, then I can quickly talk to it without writing it. But of course, we are going to close this conversation so we can explain to you how the rest of VS Code works. Because the biggest difference, if we go here into Explorer, is that we need to set up our folder. Because Claude Code actually works with local files. The powerful thing is that it can create files, it can interact with files, it can interact with our browser, it can do many, many things. But the first step is to create a folder from which we will control it, right? All of the files, the system prompt, and everything will be in our folder. So the first thing we are going to do is I'm going to go here on my drive and create a folder, and I will go N8N builder, right? So I create an empty folder on my drive right here, and then when I go open folder, I'm gonna find the N8N builder, select folder, and yes, I trust the authors, right? Because that is my file. I trust the authors, and we got a bunch of stuff open here, which we don't need, right? This is built with agent, welcome. So as you can see, you can have multiple windows open at the same time, but I don't care about that. What I care about is my Claude Code session right here. And now you can see N8N builder. The folder now is empty. So the first thing we want to do is to actually create the system prompt, right? If you've ever worked with AI, we want to essentially explain to him how we are going to work together. What are we working on? You know, how he should behave, right? So this is very important to set up as the first step. So I will click on new file and do claude.md. MD is essentially a markdown file. You've seen these files, right? When it's using essentially hashtags to format the file, like headers, paragraphs, and so on. So this will be the system prompt. I could type into it manually, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is actually I'm going to use AI to write my system prompt. So I'm going to explain to him what we are going to do today and what is he going to help me with and everything we are going to use so he can prepare the system prompt. Because the system prompts often can be very long, you know, with a lot of details, and I definitely don't want to write it manually. So I'm going to close the file right here. I'm not going to save it. And I'm now going to explain to him what are we going to do today. Hey, I need your help to write the Claude.md system prompt for this project. We are going to build N8N workflows together in my N8N cloud instance. You are going to build the whole workflow using the N8N MCP and using the N8N skills. I will leave the links down below so you can actually set up the system prompt accordingly to be as efficient as possible. So now what I did, I explained to him that he needs to help me write the Claude.md, which is our system prompt that we are going to build N8N workflows together in my cloud instance. He's going to build the whole workflow using the N8N MCP and the N8N skills. So I will leave the links down below so he can prepare the system prompt accordingly to be as efficient as possible. And I mentioned something that we haven't covered yet, N8N MCP Server and N8N skills. We find the links right here. I will also leave that in the description. And this is essentially an MCP server, Model Context Protocol, which allows Claude Code to interact with our N8N instance. He essentially uses this to know how to work in our N8N to create the workflow, right? He's not going to advise us only. He's actually going to go there and build it. And the N8N MCP server is the way he actually connects to our instance and knows how to interact with it. And there is a guy who actually prepared the MCP server for us. So he documented all of this. We don't really have to understand it. On GitHub, there is his repository where he has everything, right? And we are essentially giving our Claude Code the link to it so he knows what it looks like. He knows how all of this works, right? So he can then interact with our instance. The second thing are N8N skills. You've probably heard about Claude skills, which are established workflows, essentially procedures for Claude on how to execute something. This basically teaches him how to work with the server, right? The MCP server. So the MCP server helps him interact with our N8N instance, so he can create the workflow. And then the skills teach him how to use the MCP server, right? Very elegant. It would be quite time consuming to build this from scratch, but of course we don't have to do that because we find these public, which are repositories on GitHub, which are available that we can just access them right here. And the AI has everything it needs right here. So now we have this prompt, I gave him the link. And as you may notice here, we can see ask before edits, or we can switch it to edit automatically, or we can switch it to plan mode. This is different from your regular Claude session because we are essentially telling him how he wants to work, right? In the plan mode, we're essentially coming up what we are going to do together, right? We are brainstorming, figuring stuff out before we approve, before we move on to the execution. That is important, and we will definitely do that once we build our N8N workflow, right? Once we clarify what we actually want to do. Then we have ask before edits because he's going to do change files, go online. So every time he is about to make an edit, he will ask us for permission, right? It is like a safety feature. Or we can tell him like, hey, edit automatically. I trust you. There is also a way to bypass all of the permissions, but I would recommend doing that only if you are very sure about the workflow he's going to execute, right? To minimize any risk. But once you have like established workflows, you can use it so he works basically fully autonomously once you trigger the workflow. But we are not going to do that. We're just going to say edit automatically, and now we will let him work. And now, as you can see, he wants to go online on GitHub to see the N8N MCP server, and he's asking us, am I allowed to do that, right? So of course I'm going to say yes. Go ahead and continue. So he is done. It took a few minutes, but the beautiful thing about Claude Code is that sometimes he works for 10, 15, 20 minutes because he's an agent and he goes out there and executes. And what's also different from your regular Claude or ChatGPT session is that we can actually follow what he did. He went on GitHub, he read everything he needed to read, and then he wrote the system prompt. Right? So he says the key sections, what he filled in. And if we open the file, the Claude .md, now we can see you're an expert N8N workflow automation assistant. Your primary role is to help users build, configure, and optimize N8N workflows. And here, core capabilities, N8N MCP Server, N8N skills. There are 7 specialized skills. I didn't have to tell him anything. He just went online, downloaded everything, and we have this long system prompt that will help him to perform way better when we actually want to create these workflows in N8N, right? Because your regular Claude Code can write code, but he doesn't know exactly how N8N works. So this essentially teaches him how N8N works exactly so he can become an expert. Now, our next step is to actually install the MCP server and the skills into Claude, because now he has a system prompt that's telling him, hey, you have access to this. But currently, he doesn't have access to it. What we need to do is that we need to create the MCP server on our computer and install the skills, which sounds very intimidating. And it actually used to be quite annoying to do that, to create and host your own MCP server. Like, what does it even mean? But thankfully, we have Claude Code. So what we are going to do is that we are going to tell him to install these, send him the link, and he will do all of it. So now we simply ask him, hey, can you help me install the N8N MCP and the N8N skills for me? And I left the same links. And suddenly you see another cool feature. He creates his own to-do list, which means that he's going to tell us like, hey, these are the things I'm going to do, right? Which is very valuable when we have multiple steps so we can review and work together. And now he is asking us what he can actually do and to install the MCP server. And here we are going to give him permissions to actually do everything he needs to install it. So now he worked for a few minutes, and as you can see, he was installing the N8N MCP server. He ran into a few issues, but the beautiful thing about Claude Code is that he's going to fix them. He's not going to annoy you, right? There's some command not found, some issues, but just let him work and he will figure it out. Then he installed the skills, right? So he installs the skills so he can use that with the MCP server. And now I actually asked him to help me configure the N8N MCP so I don't have to do it manually. Because he asked me, go into the file, put your API key, put your URL, and I don't want to do that manually. I want you to do it for me, right? So I tell him, help me configure the N8N MCP server so I don't have to do it manually, because here he was like, add your N8N credentials. But I don't want to do that, right? So told him to help me with that. And now, what is your N8N instance URL? So I'm going to say that we are on the cloud. So let me go into my website right here. That is my N8N dashboard. And as you can see, this is the URL of my cloud session, right, in N8N. And I'm going to submit it here. And he's also asking for my API key. We essentially need to generate the API key, which is the secret he's going to use to access our instance. So if I go back here and go into N8N API, again, might sound a bit intimidating, but don't worry, Claude Code is there to help you. So if you get stuck, send him a print screen, ask him questions. But other than that, it's actually quite straightforward. So I'm going to generate an API key. I'm going to delete it after the video. So we are going to say Claude Code video and save it. And now we have the API key. So I'm going to copy it and copy paste it right here so he can use it. And now we are ready. He told us, hey, you need to restart Claude Code for the MCP server to load with the new configuration. So let's do that and see if it works. So I'm going to exit VS Code. And I'm going to open it again, and hopefully he will have access to it. And if not, we're going to troubleshoot. So that's part of the process. Beautiful. So we ask him if he has the access, and he says, hey, let me check. Let me run N8N health check. Because he has access to the MCP, he has access to a tool, which is health check, which is there to make sure that he has access. He did everything, connection status, and all of the tools available are ready. So we are ready to build our N8N workflow. We are going to build competitor meta ad intelligence. So essentially it will be a workflow where we input specific Facebook page URL, and it will be scraping their ads once a week to send us a report into our email, about their hooks, their angles, and patterns worth testing. So you imagine you have your competition, also advertising, e-com on Facebook, on Meta. So we want to simply get the intelligence, get the reports on what they are actually doing. This is relatively straightforward and simple automation, right? Because we don't want to spend an hour building something complex, even though you could. But this is more to showcase you how to actually work with Claude Code and how relatively simple it is to set up a very valuable workflow, right? Because once we have the base, we can change it, right? We can create database, right? Instead of going into an email, we can save it into a spreadsheet and we can change it however we want. But what's more important is actually realizing where you can automate, where you can implement agents and automations, because this is the number one thing we discuss when I talk to sellers about, like, hey, where is opportunity in my business, right? This is one of many, many, many workflows you can build. So what I actually did, I created an agent with a skill in Claude, which you can easily access. I will leave a link in the description. And it allows you to run an audit to figure out where in your business you can benefit from automation and agents, and it also tells you how to build them, right? So now we are in our regular Claude, and if you run this analysis, you will get a nice report like this, right? So essentially it will interview you, ask you questions for 30 minutes, discuss what you do, how you do things, and then it will create this beautiful dashboard to essentially give you advice where you can automate. So the way I do it, we have 3 levels, right? We have advisors. Those are your Claude chats, brainstorming strategy. Imagine your, strategic planning. You go, you talk back and forth, finding new angles, new opportunities. This is simple chat, but again, very powerful. So these are advisor level. And in this case, we have example of a CEO of an 8-figure D2C brand. And we have, strategic planning and marketing opportunities. This is based on the interview. It's telling him where he can save time by doing this. So if we could open, like, hey, what to build? Chief Strategy Officer agent in Claude projects, used for quarterly planning, market expansion scenarios, and competitive strategy sessions. And he tells you how to build this. Level 2 are assistant levels. They are essentially Claude skills with MCPs, scraping and stuff, what you can do directly from Claude. Again, it tells you, financial analysis based on what the person is doing, and based on the interview, it tells him what to build, Claude skill, financial intelligence, weekly P&L analysis, and so on. So it tells you what to build. And the third level is like a full-fledged AI automation. This is for high-level volume deterministic workflows, like, for example, the meta ad intelligence. And it tells you, like, hey, for this person, executive dashboard updates or daily performance alerts and exception reporting. And it tells you what that should look like. So then I could bring this, copy it, bring it to my N8N workflow builder and tell him, like, build this. You know, very straightforward, but it all starts with the audit. So I will leave the link in the description. But now we are actually going to build this workflow. Finally, we are ready. We are good to go. And we are going to start a new chat right here. So we're going to take off this one. You know, you can access the conversation right here. You have the conversation history. And we're going to switch into the plan mode, right? So what we want to do here is that we don't really want to tell him how to do things, right? Because he knows, he can figure it out. What we want to tell him is what we want to do, like what is the objective, how we actually want it to work, right? So I have a simple example, right? Workflow that lets me input competitor Facebook URL, scrapes their recent ads, images, analyzes them with AI, and then sends me a nicely formatted email. Very, very straightforward request, right? So I'm just gonna copy it and then, you know, help me create a plan and draft some options how to actually create this workflow to be as efficient and simple as possible. Now we are in plan mode, so we're going to send him this request. Now we are going to wait a bit so he can create the plan and present it to us. And then we are going to answer a few questions likely. And then we are also going to approve the plan, right? So he's exploring Facebook scraping capabilities, exploring AI analysis patterns, right? He's going to search a few things. So I'm going to go through this and then I'll be right back with you. He did the research of what's available in N8N and now he's asking us a few questions how we actually want to set up the workflow. And this is also the benefit of Claude Code, that you are just selecting, right? You don't need to reply everything. You're just like choosing the options. So let me answer all of these and I will get back to you. Now it took him a few minutes. So sometimes I recommend to tell him to keep things simple so you don't have to wait for 10 minutes like me. But what he did, he created a detailed plan about the workflow. And then we simply told him that we want to execute and build the workflow. So as you can see, there's a lot of text. He prepared the whole detailed plan and then he actually started building it. And now he got overview, hey, we finished working, you know, this is what the workflow looks like, schedule trigger, Apify. He also asked me about scraping. So he recommended to use Apify, which is a scraping website where you can get access to these actors. You know, he explained everything to me, how it works. So the Facebook ads library scraper allows us to input the name of the competitor. You know, we chose, you know, Space Goods, probably know this brand, that we want to scrape their ads. And based on that, then send it to AI for analysis, you know, so we just set up account or Apify. I already had it, you know, I will also leave a link in the description. So that's fairly straightforward. Then we will send it for AI to analysis and then prepare the HTML report, which is essentially formatting for a nice email, and then a note to send the email, right? So we said like, hey, this workflow should run once a week. And now he tells us how to set up the configuration, you know, because we, of course, the N8N workflow is not just plug and play. We need to go, you know, prepare our API keys, the credentials for the AI calls, and so on. So what it's super helpful before we review it and before we finalize the workflow is actually have at least basic understanding of N8N. I have a video on my channel where in 30 minutes or so, you learn the basics of N8N, right? This is extremely powerful. It does like 90% of the work for you, but you need to at least understand what you're looking at when you then go into N8N, you know, set up and make minor tweaks. If there are any issues, Claude will guide you through that. So I will show you how to finalize the workflow. But as I said, understanding the basics of N8N, very, very important. So let's get into it. So now we are looking at the workflow we generated. So as I said, we will have to do a few setups. So it's important to understand at least the basics. Number one, since we are sending the ads, you know, in the data set to AI to analyze the ads, we need to choose the model. And as you can see, we have Claude right here. And you need to add the credentials, right? So what you're going to do, Anthropic, you will add your API key and you will essentially allow it to send to AI. So what we're going to do is that you simply go to platform.claude. You need to have your API key, right? So this is separate from Claude AI. So you will go here and then you go into API keys. Of course, you need to add some money into it. So, but I have like $5. And as you can see, if you run it once, it costs like 7 cents. So pretty much nothing. You create a key, right? And you will then allow it to connect to your N8N instance, right? So I've already done that. So we don't have to do it. And then we will choose Sonnet 4.5, and then we set it up the model. And as you can see, if we open this, we also see kind of the prompt he's sending. That is the system prompt for the analyzer, you know. So he will get this job, and here's the system prompt. So if we open it, you know, you're an elite advertising strategist, competitive intelligence, blah, blah. He's identifying hooks and so on. So he will do all of this. And then we will have the report for our email. So also we need to choose, you know, that it's being sent to our email. So I will include mine. So there are not that many changes I actually have to make. There we have the Apify, the scrape. So this is mostly done for us. As you can see, he chose the library scraper, also setting up the credentials exactly the same way. You know, connect my account, I connect my Apify account. You need to create these credentials to get access to it, right? And again, on Apify, you get like $5 every month or something, and it's more than enough to actually run the scrape. I already tested it, that again, it takes a few cents, and you get those $5 for free, so you don't ever have to transfer any money. So as I said, here we have the URL of the Facebook page we want to scrape. So here, define competitors. This is not the most user-friendly way to do it, but as you can see, Facebook page URL, competitor A. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add, you know, the competitor name right here. But if I wasn't sure, I would just ask Claude Code like, hey, I don't know where to put the competitor one. Here is the link, you know, help me fix that, right? And he could then do it, right? So it's basically pretty straightforward. And if I had a second competitor or multiple ones, I would of course put the URL right here. And now I believe it's pretty much everything, right? There is nothing, no other errors. Also our Gmail account, so we can actually send the email, again, credentials. So it's mostly about filling this and preparing the credentials. And what's important to note is that the workflow is not perfect. Right, as I said, we kind of need to learn the basics of N8N. It saves us time. It helps us figure out what the workflow should look like. Of course, if you are an expert at N8N, you will be able to build much more complicated workflows that probably Claude Code is not able to do yet. But these simple automations, you know, data pools, analysis, scraping, you know, it can be for Amazon, your reviews, whatever, right? Exactly. If you run this analysis, you will figure out where you can leverage these AI automations. So let's execute the workflow and see how it goes, if everything works correctly. And if not, we will troubleshoot and fix it. Okay, so the workflow worked well. What we did is that, as you can see, it loops through the competitors, because I actually made a little mistake here that I actually included the same competitor twice, so it was not necessary that it loops over them. But what happens, the scraper scrapes their ads, the AI analyzes that and then goes over it again, the next competitor. Then all of these insights from the AI are aggregated, and then the HTML email report, so I get a nicely formatted email, and then it was sent into my email. So let's see what the final report looks like. So finally, we received our report into email. So as you know, it scraped the ads, and now it's sending us an analysis of their hooks and the angles. So of course, there are a few things we could improve. One of them is the formatting of this email. But as you can see, it's taking the hooks from their ads and then analyzing them, how effective they are. You know, as you can see, the hook, educational question, value proposition, product focus, benefit stack. So suddenly we could like chain this workflow, save the ads in a database, and then use the insights, right? Use it for inspiration for, let's say, our brand, if it's our competition. Then you have the angles and messaging. As I said, the formatting is a bit off, but that's where I probably spend a little bit more time. But the value is that, right? Primarily angles identified. Angle 1, it's better than coffee, busy parent, professional productivity, gut health. Then we have patterns and trends, you know, power words, phrases, long-lasting energy, without the crash, focus on mental clarity, emoji strategy, and CTA pattern. As you can see, 100% shop now, no variation, consistent use of discount codes. Video heavy, 77% of ads are video content, UGC influencer content, and then their copywriting techniques, you know, their formulas, and so on. So we could create this system to analyze multiple competitors, you know, to have a maybe turn it into a dashboard, a spreadsheet. This was the most straightforward one. As I said, we could probably spend some time to make this better, but it's a nice introduction to workflows when without basically no experience at all, you can just sit down and create these powerful automations that essentially can then build around and make them better. But as I said, the first step really is to figure out what to automate in your business. So I will leave the link down in the description for this agent that will kind of help you run the audit and tell you which automations to build. Then here you can copy it into VS Code, run the Claude Code in N8N MCP and start building these, right? So that is very powerful. And that's it for today, and I will see you next week.